is coming in. I think it's a matter of prestige and principle now for the West to make sure that the Ukrainian government does not collapse because of these financial reasons. Unfortunately, the Ukrainian government does not understand that they have very little space. Right? They have to do reforms now. They have to get their public finances in time. And unfortunately, they understand that the West is going to give money to Ukraine in any case, and so they try to do as little as possible. They don't feel the pressure to do things immediately. And that's why I'm a little cautious that, maybe they will carry through this year, but after that, it's less clear. Because if the Ukrainian government does not deliver in terms of reforms, in terms of fixing its economic problems, no more money is going to come in.
I would only add, I'm not an economist, but Yuri's answer is pretty comprehensive, that if you take the word of the Minister of Finance at its, if you take her seriously, her projection was that by 2016, if the current reforms are implemented as they're proposed in the reform budget, that by 2016, Ukraine would return to growth. I think that's, for my personal opinion, overly optimistic. What I've heard talking to people who work in the financial industry, who worked in Ukraine and Russia specifically, is that 2019 is more of a likely number, but you can take that as what it is.
All right, next question.
We've read a lot about the opposition to Putin, namely Navalny and Khodorkovsky from France. Can somebody comment on the reality of this? Is this a possibility?
Is what a possibility?
Of opposition to Putin, of toppling his regime.
Well, Navalny is terrible. Would be worse than Putin.
And Khodorkovsky?
Well, Khodorkovsky will never be Russian president because A, is an oligarch, and B, is Jewish. I'm being very blunt. It's anti-Semitism. But Putin, I don't think necessarily Putin has the 80% he claims, but he probably has 50, 60. Opinion, the Levada Center, Russia's most prestigious public opinion poll organization, has Russians a year ago and today 80% supporting the annexation of the Crimea, even some Democrats. They're more confused about Donbass. They don't want Russian troops to fight in Donbass. That's different. But Crimea is a bit like, to Russia, like Kosovo to the Serbs. And it's very emotional. It's just particularly Sevastopol. So I don't think that the Russian opposition amounts to anything.
If I please can add to your answer, may I? Khodorkovsky is not real opposition. In Ukrainian question, Khodorkovsky stated that he agrees with the occupation of Crimea. And Khodorkovsky is East oriented, so he can fight with Putin for power, but he is not real opposition. He will do the same thing.
Okay, next question, please.
Today is the 13th of February. I'd like to ask a question about Maidan. I think that Valeria was at Maidan, is that right?
Yeah, that's true.
So I'd like to ask her a question. The theoretical things that you said about Maidan were very interesting, but I'd like to ask a practical question. One of the primary results of Maidan was, of course, that Yanukovych left. And this occurred around February 21st. BBC has a program called Assignment. We're almost at the point where it's the exact 1-year anniversary of February 20th. BBC had a program where they said that they wanted to talk about some of the things that happened on that last night from the 20th to the 21st. And everybody hopes that there'll be an investigation of some sort. Of course, it's very difficult because it's very political. Some people want an investigation, other people don't want an investigation. Anyway, they had interviewed a number of people in Kiev. Among the people that they interviewed were Andrei Parubi, who was a policeman, I think. He might be Yanukovych's chief of the riot police. Is that what he was?
No. He was the chief for security on Maidan.
Right. So he was the head of the riot police, basically.
No.
He was
No.
He was the riot police. So the police were opposed to the to Maidan protests.
No, just the contrary.
The Maidan defense, or whatever.
Oh, I see, okay.
People police.
They also interviewed somebody called Andrei Shevchenko,
Yeah.
and he is supposed to be also on the Maidan side of things?
Yeah.
Well, he's a member of parliament and he's an activist.
Yes, what is it?
Okay, well, the main thing is that the BBC asked these questions, what happened on the 21st and the 20th and 21st. Basically, they said that Parubi and Shevchenko were involved in phone calls. And some of the phone calls were with the head of the riot police, whatever it is, the riot police chief or whatever it was called. And supposedly at one point during the night of the 20th or the 21st, the head of the riot police called Shevchenko and said, look, there's some bullets coming towards us, not, Molotov cocktails, but bullets, and if this doesn't stop immediately, we're going to do something, namely there's going to be a big massacre. And Shevchenko apparently took a couple dozen people, went into the Conservatory of Music and also into the, is it Hotel Ukrainian or something like that? And then they began going from the first floor to the top floor, and Shevchenko was checking all the rooms and things to look for snipers. So if there is investigation, what do you think will happen, and what are your theories about, agent provocateur and so on and so forth?
Yeah.
Did you repeat the question again?
Who were the sites?
Frankly speaking, what happened precisely?
There is controversial.
Okay,
I
wait.
think what happened on the superficial level, I think that everyone interested knows. And I do not want to speculate and to give you some kind of conspiracy theory, what really is underneath it. What you are stating seems reasonable. What people tend to think that really Yanukovych felt that he lacks support not only from the party of region, but also from the military forces, who were not too big, I would point it this way, became not too loyal. So he
Became what?
Not too loyal towards Yanukovych, so he felt that he was losing support from military forces, and it was crucial for him because he was afraid of his life, so it was not just about power. And well, but again, we have many speculations, and I do not have enough information to give you, some kind of
Next question,
theory.
please.
Thank you. I have a more general conceptual question. I heard in the last presentation the term fascism and Nazism come out quite often, and I'm wondering, maybe I can have a collective opinion as well, what exactly are the parameters for a fascist or a neo-Nazi state, and how is Russia distinguished in that matter from other states that kind of propagate their own national ideology and culture? Is it in essence a nationalist ideology, or would you say that it has other factors connected with it? Thank you.
The term fascist has been misused by the Soviet Union for decades and now in post-Soviet society. In the Soviet Union, and this legacy comes from that, right? In the Soviet Union, the ideological tirades of the Communist Party were particularly against Ukrainians, Georgians, Baltic states. They called them usually bourgeois nationalists because this was a communist system. Many of the tirades are also against Ukrainian diaspora, Baltic diaspora. They accused them of having ties to the Nazis during World War II. But the term was extremely elastic. So in the case of Ukraine, for example, it applied to everybody from the far right nationalist to a Democrat supporting Helsinki principles to a national communist like Ivan Juba. So it's everybody who opposed the Soviet regime in whatever form. So Euro-communists, liberals, or nationalists. And that tradition has remained today. Putin sees in Ukraine good Ukrainians who like Russia and fascists. Those are the two. If you go to Alex Dugin, look him up on YouTube. He did an incredible piece a few months ago where he said, kill Ukrainians. And what he meant by Ukrainians were these fascists. Because the good Ukrainians are over there. They like us. But these lot are all fascists. And they're all, and like the Soviet legacy also comes in about, they're all puppets of the West. Because in the Soviet Union, dissidents and emigres were funded by the CIA. That was the ideological premise, right? The CIA or Mossad, because of Jewish dissidents as well, Zionists. depending on which day of the week it was.
Alina, you studied extreme right.
And that's the same today. Russian legislation talks about people getting grants from the West as agents. And that premise that the Euromaidan was a fascist coup helped by the US is based on that sort of Soviet background. So it has nothing to do with the political science definition of fascism. Zero.
Thank you. Next question.
That wasn't the question, actually.
Next question, please.
Also, another example of you saying that people getting grants from the West is.
Can you speak up?
Oh yeah, there's a guy named Oleg Tsarnov, I think, and he accused it was an NGO in the Ukraine that was a U.S. funded project called like Tech Camp or something like that. But he said it a year earlier, and I know that he's kind of known for his more conspiracy theories, but he kind of accused them of being an agitator and kind of teaching certain sections to create rebellion, which I think plays into that as people accusing him, or he's accusing these U.S. things of creating kind of. My question was, in the U.S. and Western media, you see a lot of biased reporting as well, and you see that in Russia as well, and also you have Graham Phillips, he's pretty active in reporting. I don't know too much about him, but one of my questions is, what do you think about the Western media's portrayal on the situation? And kind of, I feel like there's a lot of ignorance to the region and the politics of the region, and also, although nuclear weapons have changed the shift of how war is fought, the Ukraine has always been.
That's 3 questions, okay. The question is, do you see a bias in Western media about the portrayal of conflict in Ukraine?
If I may just jump in.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it was interesting to see at the beginning this has been shifting, particularly not for Western media. There's US media, there's German media, right? And the German media specifically basically taking the reporting of Russian state media, which is not objective, it is not autonomous from the state, and using that as fact in its own reporting. And this, I think, is an artifact and a consequence of the amount of money that the Russian state has invested in its media machine, and to the extent to which Russia today operates in the local languages across multiple countries. It's even here in Washington. I mean, not Washington, I forgot where it was. But it is in Washington, D.C. I see ads for Russia Today all the time. So yes, of course, the Western media, I think, has been very influenced by the Russian propaganda as well. And it was shocking to see to the extent to which the German media were honestly naive at the outbreak of the Maidan, and followed the same sort of ideologies and the same ideas about what was happening in Maidan as the Russian media was reporting.
I'm sorry, we have lots of questions. Could you please let another person ask a question?
Well, thank you all for the great presentation. The question is, so what are the best weapons to win informational war, and what exactly Ukrainian needs to succeed? And how people here are willing to help, can help?
I think that my presentation touched this subject, so I'll start and you join me. I would separate the answer into 2 parts, because the first one concerns what Ukraine has to do on its own territory, and then we can talk about 3 dimensions. First one is tactical, and it's working. It was, for me, it's always about some kind of asymmetrical measures, because we can never beat Russia with money, with potential, with media, because we do not have comparable measures. That's why we should think of some kind of asymmetrical answers. And I believe that in tactical dimension it would be humor, what Taras mentioned, because mocking Russian propaganda makes it ineffective. Secondly, it's stop fake initiatives. We have a lot of that. We have different websites, resources which reveal the propaganda, which kind of expose the absurdness of all the statements when they post some pictures from different parts of the world, from Syria, Iran, or whatever, and claiming that this is Donbass and blah, blah, blah. In strategic perspective, I would say that we have to think about some narratives and to think about moving to the West, because sometimes it seems to us that it's obvious, but certainly in the global perspective we are losing the war. And here I would mention the urgency of our consulates throughout the world, that they have to react rapidly and they have to give some information in native languages to be heard, because what Alina says about that media want to explore different sources, but they do not have real options to choose. Well, and thirdly, in kind of long-term perspective, it is maybe we should think about the Putin strategy of finding weak points into the country and to working, to collaborating with the opposition and to work on the Russia's territory, and it might be effective.
Yeah, and you rightly said I didn't answer the second part. A very important question. Why is Russia a fascist state? In the real sense of that fascist, not the Soviet sense, in what we would understand as in Western political science. And I deliberately just listed the things. I'll read them off the list. Cult of the leader, machismo, Putin hanging around without his shirt on. Pathetic. But anyway, somebody at the age of that, 62. But anyway, glorification of Russian imperialism and Joseph Stalin. Joseph Stalin today has 50% support by Russians as a glorious leader. Could you imagine 25 years on after World War II that 50% of Germans believed Hitler was a great guy? Defense of Russians and Russian speakers abroad. And here you could easily make a nice comparison of the Nazi occupation of the Rhineland and Crimea. Nashi, the youth organization of the Putler regime, going around attacking people and espousing sort of summer camps, ideology and such like. Fraudulent elections and destruction of Russian parliamentary system. Anti-foreigner xenophobia and anti-Americanism.
Last two questions.
So my question is also about Russian misinformation war, but not about the Ukrainian position to that, but what about Western institutions? Peter Pomerantsev and Michael Weiss put out a very interesting report back in November arguing that Western institutions have been abused by Russian information war. What do you think about that? For example, the habit of presenting 2 points of view, when one point of view is one version of events and the one is completely made up. The observer walks away thinking that truth is somewhere in the middle and it's not all Ukrainians are Nazis, but only half of them are Nazis. How Western institutions can deal with this type of information?
Thanks.
I'll jump in and you can follow. I think that's been sort of a very sophisticated tactic of what we could think of as Russian propaganda versus Soviet propaganda. Is that it is this presentation of a multitude of opinions that's particularly appealing in the internet age, right? Where what the social media have done, what internet information has done, is that you have access to these multitude of opinions, and it's hard to judge what is the right one, right? I think what has been expressed a lot, and this is a little as a plug for the Atlantic Council, is this need to have information and a very clear story that shows these processes of disinformation, how they happen. And that's actually something that we're working on putting together, because it was something that was explicitly expressed by the current ambassador to Ukraine from the United States, Ambassador Pyatt. And this is something that hasn't been done. And using social media is especially important because in Russia, how to reach Russian society, there's very few spaces left for opposition, if whatever semblance of it there is, to be able to speak freely. And social media is still one of those spaces.
Okay, last question, please.
Yes, my question, I would like to get back to the idea of default and ask Yuri Gribichenko. Don't you think that even that default will hit the image of the state, finally Ukraine will succeed from it because all the European money will go not on covering Gazprom debts, but on development of the economy of the country?
If it were this easy, many countries would have defaulted. Unfortunately, it's much more complicated. It's going to be very disruptive for the economy because the banking system in Ukraine is going to be cut off from the rest of the world. The banking system will not be able to issue loans, and it's like a block in the kind of economic system. It's true that, sometimes the default is actually a good option, but I don't think Ukraine is at this stage when it's a good idea to default. I would like to ask last question, use my powers as a moderator. The panel was called The Future of Ukraine, and we didn't say much about the future. I want you, Valeria, Alina, and Taras, just briefly say, what do you think is going to be in Ukraine in a year from now? What will Ukraine look like in a year from now?
I'm glad I'm going last.
The situation, what you mentioned about economy, there are too many variables to make any prognosis. It's impossible. We can only guess, and we can, at best, give a bunch of scenarios. A pessimistic one, an optimistic one, so on. So, what I can tell you for sure that it's going to be a very hard year. In any case, unfortunately. And right now it doesn't look like we'll have a breakthrough in terms of economy, nor in terms of national unity, because it's all shattering the society. This unique feeling of unified nation is now under question, it's threatened. And going back to your question, in Kiev there are many people who think that maybe Ukraine would benefit if she right now gives up on Donbass. It would benefit in terms of unity, it would benefit in terms of economy, what Taras mentioned. So, and it does not work for this unity and for clear understanding where we are moving at the end of the day, because we want to succeed, we want the better future, but right now it's a vague perspective, and we cannot think of on our own, because we have to take into account on the one hand what Putin wants to do, and we do not know what he wants to do like next day, and on the other hand, what is the policy of our Western partners. So it's not only up to us.
Alina.
I have no idea. I think anything that you say now, you'll probably be wrong, and this is recorded, so I'll just put it out there. Right. I think in terms of, since Valeria spoke a bit about national unity and the prospects for that, I think in terms of land and territorial sovereignty, I would give the pessimistic view. I don't think it's clearly not over, As what's happening right now, as the new ceasefire agreement was signed, is that we see the Beltsa being surrounded, we see Ukrainian military troops being trapped there, which is setting up a very bad scenario. And I think the Donbass, like it or not, is lost. It's already been completely decimated, economically and politically, and in some ways probably culturally as well. And Russia doesn't want to touch it, because they could have annexed it, to be honest with you, if they wanted to right after Crimea. And the Ukrainian government doesn't want to touch it because it's a complete black hole for the economy. So I think what we'll probably see is a nice division where Mariupol will become part of this contested region, and give Russia its land bridge to Crimea. And hopefully, maybe it will become a frozen conflict, and that might be the best case scenario, which is a very sad one. But I don't know, I don't see Russia pulling out anytime soon, and I don't see, even with Western help, the Ukrainian government making serious advances into the current territory.
Thank you, Taras.
Well, first of all, I go back to the question of definitions. I would disagree that Donbass is lost. Depends on which part of Donbass you're talking about. I was in Donbass in December. I visited Slavyansk and Kramatorsk as part of my research. So Western Donbass is more similar in identity to Dnipropetrovsk. The city of Slavyansk, which was under Russian occupation from April to July last year, and they call it occupation, the locals call it occupation, has only one Russian school, the rest are Ukrainian schools. So this is Donbass. Southern Donetsk is very cosmopolitan. Mariupol has a lot of Greeks, it's a Greek minority. And similarly, northern Luhansk is really an extension of Kharkivshina, of Kharkiv. a lot of very rural and very Ukrainian, and the separatists had no support there. So the separatists are confined to 1/3 to a half of Donbass. So even though we might be going to public opinion towards having a velvet or non-velvet divorce, there are two problems. First of all, which part of Donbass do you allow to go to Russia? Do you say all of Donbass can go, or just the bit that they control? Do you therefore have to have a referendum in each rayon, each local district, to say, do you want to go this way or do you want to go that way? And are these guys going to accept it? And secondly, many people say, in Ukraine that, yeah, I wouldn't mind them being given Donbass to Russia, but I'm not sure that Putin will stop at that. That's the problem, the zero trust. And it's not just in Kiev, by the way, it's in Brussels, Washington, Ottawa. Nobody trusts Putin, what his next step is. He's made lying into an art. So again, I would maybe favor, like holding with the local elections, a referendum in each region of Donbass to say, where do you want to go, that way or that way? And then the new border would be the current border. But it's easier for me to say it in California than it is to on the ground. So I asked what's going to happen in a year's time. I think Minsk II is going to collapse. I think the West is going to start supplying some kind of defensive equipment. Russia's going to be in the worst economic financial straits. Where that goes, who knows?
There's some good news.
Thank you. Thanks very much. If you have questions, you can talk one-on-one.
I want to thank today's speakers, Kuzio, Alina, we'd also like to thank the volunteers that made this event possible. We got Sylvia Wolfman, who was live streaming this event, so you can all find the recording online. Today's event was organized by Institute of Slavic, Eastern European and Eurasian Studies, UC Berkeley, and a non-profit organization called Nova Ukraine. We do have a stand about Nova Ukraine outside and a donation box, so feel free to learn more about us and contribute. You can also learn more about Nova Ukraine at our website, novaukraine.org. Thank you for coming, and I look forward to seeing you at our future events.